We're good.
Okay, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Disabled Girls Who Lift. Thanks for having us. Thanks for listening to us. Thanks for sharing us. Thanks for commenting on our Instagram, subscribing to our Patreon, etc., etc., etc. Anyways, so this is Marcia on Seminole Tribe land in Florida. They. I'm wearing my blue bandana, clear glasses, big old headphones, and microphone, and just a little gray tank top dress. It's a little cool over here in my part of town, but probably not as cold as some people. But I'm living life. I like this. I don't like hot weather. Anyways, on to Marybeth.
I need me some hot weather. It's like I'm wearing a super knitted sweater over here.
Disgusting.
It's freezing. It's about to rain in a few days in California, but need some of that Florida heat. My name is Marybeth. I'm sitting on Ohlone land here in Northern California, wearing a rust terracotta type sweater, Filipina, wearing black glasses, black headphones, black hair. So excited for today. It's been so long since we've had an episode. It feels like a whole month. But we're inviting an amazing guest, a good friend of Marcia's, Gabriella Brost, coming in from Richmond, Virginia, sitting on Powhatan land, and we can have you just give a visual description of yourself.
Sure. So I'm Gabby. Thanks for having me. I am a brown femme wearing gold hoop earrings with red and black hair and a gray crew neck. I'm sitting in front of a cabinet that has a lot of half dead and half alive plants in
it. Is the plant half dead or half alive? Ponder it.
I mean, there's like several plants, so it kind of depends on which one.
A ponderance.
That's all of our lives, especially after the winter.
Yeah.
Who made it?
What is winter?
But Gabby is an inclusive, trauma, mindful strength and fitness coach. You are a multi-sport strength athlete. I believe you've done powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, strongman, pretty much all of the above that we've done here at, that relates to barbell strength. You're also an author, avid half dead, half alive plant collector and tarot reader. But yeah, I mean, shoot, there's a lot to talk about, a lot that's been going on, I think, on your feed that we want to hear about.
Yeah, there's so much happening. I think probably my first question, because this is always interesting to find out, is what made you go from lifter to coach?
So my professional background, I was a professor at a for-profit, so I've always been in education. And when I started lifting, I realized that, this is like what I actually like teaching, and what I actually like educating on. And to me, coaching is such a blend of like education and a couple of other disciplines. And so I was really drawn to doing that. And after doing that part-time for a while, I just decided one year to kind of go all in, and I've been all in ever since.
Wow. So you went from teaching at a university to teaching in a gym.
Yep.
Like
basically.
in-person stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I've done online coaching since like 2016 as well. So I've done both for a while. I've been in-person coaching longer, but the translation was not all that different, although I do wish I had a whiteboard sometimes, because like you can take the teacher out of the classroom, but like I love a whiteboard.
Let me draw you a flow chart. Hold on.
Correct.
Yeah, no, I feel that. Sometimes it just helps to write things out and down also. Mm-hmm. How long were you lifting before you decided to coach?
I had been lifting for about 2 or 3 years. And I was at a gym where I was sort of taking on a little bit more like coaching opportunities of like co-leading things and stuff like that. And so that was like my first foray into coaching.
Dipping your toes in. And how were the coaches that you had before? So it wasn't really like I hate what's out there, I'm going to do this myself. It was actually like, oh, this is kind of cool. I just want to teach people
Yeah,
things.
well, my first coach was really abusive mentally and like psychologically. And so when I got into coaching, a big part of it was like, I want to do this better to make sure nobody ever feels like this again. And then I've had like some great coaches since then. And like my coach now is great. But really, when I really got into coaching, I didn't know that being inclusive and trauma mindful was like a unique thing. Like I only knew like that I had a really bad experience and I knew like a couple other people, but in my mind it was just like how you do things was you put people first and you operate from this like inclusive lens because that was just my orientation from my background. I have a bachelor's in psychology and I have a master's in criminal justice and sociology, and all of my research was focused on like justice system and equity and like trauma and things like that. So I just always been oriented in that fashion. So when it came to coaching, I just carried that over, and I didn't really realize that that was a unique thing, which I hope it's like
like
controversial
even to some people. Like some of the shit, some
people
just like flat out disagree.
Yeah, like I didn't know it would be controversial to want clients who are in line with your values. Like who knew? That was a hot take.
That's crazy. But it also sucks, that you have to come from, somewhat of a toxic environment or have toxic relationships like that to kind of change that environment for other people. And hey, sociology, that was my degree too, but you learn so much, honestly, by learning like how other people move and work and speak in the gym or at work, and
just these patterns you pick up on.
Right. And wait, so can you tell us a little bit about how it is controversial, like being so intentional about that, like, and putting that, in your description as a coach? And
yeah, so I mean, the strength world is super like white, male, cis, heteronormative, very patriarchal, very like pro police and all that sort of stuff, which is a lot of things that I am not. So especially being very open about my values of like trans lives matter, Black lives matter, like all those sorts of things. I definitely received like several DMs, especially like in 2020 and since then, of being like, just stick to fitness, like your values don't need to come into this and things like that. And I think, talking to other people who are oriented in a similar lens that I am, having them share similar experiences is really eye-opening to see just how toxic the mainstream fitness industry really is. But there's definitely been like cases of like, oh, well, I would have like hired you if you weren't so vocal about like defunding the police, or if you weren't so vocal about like abortion rights.
I hate this is not an airport. I don't need you to announce your fucking arrivals and departures. The hell? Do you go up to every strawberry in the grocery store and I was gonna choose you, however I didn't like the way you were shaped or exactly the color, I just wanted, like, you don't fucking do that shit.
Yeah,
moving.
And my response to that stuff is always just okay, or like cool story.
But it's great that you found out early, right?
Yeah.
Because if you would have been stuck with a client who you didn't even know what their beliefs were until 1 or 2 years in, you're not kind of surprised by each other, if it comes up.
I think like the nature of my coaching is it is like very high communication and like taking into account a lot of different things in all of my lifters' lives and like their actual humanity. And so like inevitably these things are going to come up. Like I am going to have to alter programming for my clients who got tear gassed, or my clients who are disabled, or my clients who have chronic illness and stress flares it up with all that's going on in the world. Like that's just how I've always coached. And so it is really good to find out early. And yeah, it's just very strange that people feel the need to announce their departures like that, or be like, I'm going to unfollow you now. Like, cool.
Okay, cool.
Go for it. Great.
While you're at it, post a review on Yelp. Like, goddamn.
Let everyone know why you disagreed.
Travelocity. please.
Yeah, I don't know.
And don't come back.
Is it usually white women? Just wondering.
Lots of white women.
Yeah.
Lots of white men.
I mean, the
well.
white men, yes, but I feel like the announcement of like whatever you're saying doesn't apply to me, and I'm so used to everything applying to me, is like peak white woman.
Yeah, and there were definitely a lot of situations, especially I would say like in 2020, where I had like a lot of white women come into my DMs and be like, but actually, or like, here's why this,
Yeah.
and just do that sort of behavior, or like somehow try to make me feel bad for my advocacy and like ability, the things that I was doing, like my own activism, because I was like very active on the ground in 2020, and still am in a lot of capacities in like my local community. But it was just like the strangest phenomenon of being like number one, like, why do you care? And number two, like, you can literally just scroll by. Like, it's not that hard.
Who are you?
Right.
Like, who
Twitter
are
fingers.
you?
Mhm.
It's very weird and very, very old news. But I mean, really, some people are so used to the world revolving around them. It always makes me think of the skit they had on SNL. I don't watch it too much, so I couldn't even tell you how old it is. Probably years old. But they had the skit where it's like, Beyonce's music isn't for us. Beyonce is black, and then like white people had a meltdown. She had like one album where she really shifted.
Yeah. Or wasn't it after like that one
Or-
Super Bowl?
I'm not
Or-
sure when.
No.
Something happened and she shifted. She got like extra black, you know?
Yeah.
Before that, she was just like cute and cool. And then at some
Right.
point she got like extra black, and people were like, oh my God, I can't stand this. Just do your music. Keep the politics out of it. It's like everything always has politics in it. It's just this is the first time it has nothing to do with you. You can't fucking handle it.
Yeah, and that's
Personal
what like a
problem.
lot of conversations I've had with other coaches who have been like wanted to be vocal about their values but have felt really intimidated to do that because of all the things that we've described, is like bodies are political. Like bodies have been a political battleground for freaking ever, and there's still such a political like battleground. And I think if you work with anybody and you work with their body and their health, like it is inherently political, especially if you work with any type of population who is not like essentially like white women and white dudes.
Yeah. There's no way you can get around it. And there's so many levels to a lot of us, right? Like all the intersections, whether it's
Mhm.
like, you know, you're political because you're the child of immigrants, or because you're not white, or because you're disabled, or anything.
Right.
And you just keep adding all those things. You can't just pretend like that shit doesn't affect the way you lift weights at a gym. That's stupid.
Yeah, and especially it's like, you know, clients not being comfortable being in a gym environment, and I'm like really selective in the gyms that I physically work at for that exact reason. And like having clients who are trans who are like, I can't find a new gym because there's no like trans affirming gyms here, or having clients who have to like leave the gym mid workout because some sort of microaggression has happened,
Yeah.
and things like that. And it's like that obviously affects not just my job, but like how I hold space and care for the people who are paying me to do so. And it's not a responsibility I take lightly. And so it's like really kind of pisses me off when I see people just be very flippant about it, because it's like it's kind of a big deal when people hire you as a coach, or in any like caring profession like that, because you are working with people's health and bodies and like mental states and things like that. Like it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight to carry. And you're constantly like trying to correct their past wrong, like the past wrongdoings that have happened to them, right? Too. Just like you existing as like a woman of color in that space is already a statement, because a lot of what you see in those big box gyms where they're not inclusive, where they're not like a comfortable space, are cis white men who don't know like the lives and nutrition and like the everything
different
that
realities.
your clients have, yeah. So I mean, that in and of itself is just enough, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, especially in strength sport world, like strength sports is just so still like male dominated. So even just being like a queer woman who exists in that space is like something in and of itself. And to add like, you know, the layers of intersection that come on top of that, especially like for other clients that I have as well, like and myself, it becomes something where, you know, the gym shouldn't feel like you have to battle for validity to exist in a space. Like it should be an accessible and inclusive space for all people. And it should be sort of like just a space that people feel comfortable in. But that in and of itself is kind of a radical act, because it doesn't exist. It just is so rare.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
it should piss more people off, to be honest.
But it doesn't. You know, the people are okay with the status quo, so unfortunately it doesn't. And then, you know, they'll have their one token whatever friend, right? And be like, well, Sally's fine with it, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I hate that.
Oh my God.
But I think a lot of people don't even view coaching as like an education role or a relationship. It's just like, I'm a person who knows things and you'll listen. Like,
yeah. And there's so much, especially in the online world, where you're having like these interactions that are a little bit different, right? Like you're getting to know somebody over social media, you're getting to know somebody's curation of themselves, because a lot of social media is just so curated. They're like, and so much like business advice for social media is like, you know, like project yourself as an expert and as an authority, and like make people trust you. But trust is something that is like cultivated. Like no one should come to my page and automatically trust me. I don't want that. Like I want to, you know, I want to like earn people's trust, like through a relationship or through something like that. Like I don't want to be perceived as an automatic authority, because at the end of the day, like my clients know themselves best. They are the experts on themselves and their bodies. Like I can't tell people what they're feeling, but that happens so often, like in coaching roles, and people are like, oh no, you're fine.
yeah.
No, that doesn't really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like no, you're just being lazy, or you know, whatever
You
that
don't
may
get
be.
special
And that's
treatment or
just
whatever, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I give you
exactly.
You got something to say, Marybeth?
Nah, I'm just like, can we talk about gaslighting in
Lord.
like the fitness industry? Jesus Christ.
I was gonna give you a perfect example of that one. In our spoonie chat, some of this panel of spoons on Instagram talking to each other, and I was like, hey, does anyone else take like weeks to notice they're in a flare-up? Yeah. So yeah, the only reason I snapped out of like oversimplifying and overthinking things is because Gabby was like, yeah, listen. So then I'm like, wait a minute. Now that she mentions it, that's true. So then I typed that in the chat. I was like, hey, you guys ever take like weeks to notice? I wasn't really thinking about it until my coach was saying this or that. And they were like, damn, your coach said that? My coach has only ever told me you don't get special treatment.
Holy crap.
And that's just so ridiculous to me, because it's like working with humans, like you're working with human beings, like, and humanity has so much wrapped up in it. And it's such a weird way to frame it as like quote unquote special treatment versus just addressing the human being in front of you. And not even like, it goes beyond like meeting somebody where they're at. It's just like having that space for somebody to come to the table with their full humanity and say like, look, I'm not feeling well. I am in a flare up, or like these things, like this pattern of things is happening. And I, as a neutral observer, can ask questions for like additional introspection. But yeah, it's not like special treatment.
Yeah,
it's just
special
treating people
about
like
it.
people.
Yeah.
Just regular treatment.
And considering life.
Yeah.
Like life happens. Wait, for some of you that didn't get that reference, I don't think we mentioned this in the intro, but Gabby is Marcia's strength coach.
Oh yeah. she be my coach. That's right.
So go on and hire her, get in her DMs after this.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But that's such a good point to also be like humble, you know, like, yes, you are trauma informed, but you don't know everything and like anything and everything about the client coming into your space, right? So you're constantly learning from them as well. You're not I don't know. I just love
It's a
that
relationship.
open-mindedness.
It's a give and take, and you learn both ways.
But it's so rare. Like, why is that so hard to find?
Because colonizers.
Yeah. And because honestly, like, it takes effort, like, and it takes a lot of like self-checking, because like the reality is, like, as a human holding space for other humans, you're going to do harm. And so like reducing the instances of that involve being open in your communication and holding that space for people. And it's a lot less effort to just like throw a program together and like send it to somebody and be like, cool, you're good to go. Like, text me if you have a question in the situation, than to actually take the time to get to know people, which to me is just like, I think about it like from my educational background, like people learn differently.
Yeah.
And, you know, like people are visual learners or auditory learners or kinesthetic learners and all that sort of stuff. And it's like people need different things. And so it just takes more effort. And so I think a lot of people, number one, like don't want to make the effort. They just want to make a quick buck. And they think that especially online coaching is a way to do that. When I really think online coaching is harder than in-person coaching, because you don't have somebody directly in front of you. And then two, it's become the standard that like everybody expects this type of like shitty treatment, because that's what they're used to, when it really does not have to be that way. Like there are awesome coaches who exist out there. And I wish that they took up, or not even took up, but I wish they were given more space to show that to the world. And I think we're seeing that shift a little bit, with people sort of recognizing like influencer culture and stuff like that, being like, wait a minute, this seems a little suspect, you know, but it's still just such a slow thing to change, because you're changing like a major cultural narrative.
You're right. There's way too many cookie cutter programs out there. That's how I started.
I mean, we've all been there, right? We've all like, every client I've ever had has come from a background of like, I had a trainer and they didn't really listen to me. I did the cookie cutter thing and like, you know, all that sort of stuff. And we've all been there. So it's like, if we can show people that you don't have to go there, that there are other alternatives. I think that's why like this podcast and like y'all social media and everything like that is so great, because it just shows that there are alternatives that exist out there, that people don't have to settle for like the bare minimum.
Yeah, it's legit the bare minimum. Absolutely. Or it's just like the other part of the relationship of going back and forth is you go back to that coach, like you said earlier, Marybeth, the gaslighting. You tell somebody like, this isn't gonna work, and they're just be like, well, I'm the coach. Yes, it does. Yeah. The only time I've ever gotten hurt is when a coach wouldn't listen to me.
Yeah.
Like lifting wise, I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's just, there is a lot of pressure to, I think, for like newer coaches to feel like they're the expert in everything and that they know everything. But there's so much value in like recognizing what you don't know, especially like if you work with people who have chronic illness or disabilities, or just like any special condition that is something that maybe isn't in your wheelhouse. And I think a lot of coaches also don't know when to say no.
Right.
Like they don't know when to say, hey, this is not something I'm comfortable doing.
Let me refer you out.
Or literally just say, I don't know. Like, it's okay. You don't have to have the answer.
Yeah. And just like, and I think a lot of coaches can get a lot more answers if they're just approach things from a more collaborative standpoint with their clients. Like you said, it is like a relationship. There is a back and forth and a give and take, and y'all are learning about each other through that relationship. And so if coaches were more likely to approach something from like a collaboration standpoint rather than like an authoritarian standpoint, it really does make the coach's job easier, because you have more information to work with.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's so funny too, because as an adaptive athlete who has been in powerlifting for a long time, I've only had like coaches or people who were able-bodied, but since there's nothing but trial and error, right? Like 7-8 years ago, there was nobody
Right.
around me deadlifting with one hand or benching with one hand for the first time. They had to learn from me. They had no choice to just ask, like, hey, is this possible? Let's try this. I found this tool. Look, there's another person on Instagram that does something similar. Let's adapt. Like, these conversations are so necessary for these types of adaptations.
Yeah.
And another person like could be missing an extra 6-12 inches off their arm. It's always going to be different, right? Even I think adaptive strength coaches who specialize in that, they constantly have to learn as well. It's just, it just sucks that a lot of disabled or people of color that get into strength or fitness for the first time, they don't know where to turn.
Nope. They don't know where to go.
And that's why, like, I really love making kind of like more educational type content, because my ultimate goal is, like, I never want my clients to feel like they have to need me. Like, I always want my clients to feel empowered with knowledge, so that if they decide, like, one day, like, hey, like, I'm kind of done having a coach, I want to go off and do my own thing, amazing. I hope you have learned so many things.
Right.
And that is, like, the only thing that I want my clients is to have that. But like you said, there's just so many instances where that's just not the case. It's just like, do this thing because I said so, and do it this exact way because some old white guy said so.
Or not really teaching people things, so they have to depend on you. Like,
right. Like,
literally.
that forced codependency is so toxic.
Yeah.
It's so toxic.
That's pretty gross. What advice would you give for anyone that is looking for a coach to at least try not to step in shit? What should they look for?
I think really looking for a coach who aligns with your values, and thinking about values in a way that is just like more broad, like the values of your life in general. Like leading with that, like looking for that, really having conversations with coaches. I love when people send me long DMs or emails and they're like, what's your style of programming? Can I talk to current and former clients? Like, yes, all of that. Ask as many questions as possible so you really get a feel for it. And then also check their social media. Like, how do they speak about their clients? Are they speaking about them with consent? Like, are they showing people like a wide variety of people, or are they only working with certain people? Are they advocating for important political issues that are close to your heart that you want your coach to advocate for? And doing things like that, and just kind of leading from like a values first lens, I think is a really great way to start. And then don't be afraid to like interview multiple coaches, because it is a relationship. Like, not everyone's going to be the best fit, and that's totally okay, because not every coach is for every person.
Yeah, that's all very, very great tips. Yeah, I think along the way you will weed out a lot of people, because I'm sure some of those responses you'll get on any of those like steps or checks, you'll see the red flags.
Yeah. And it's just, and I always think, like, have a coach that you can have an actual conversation with, like paying attention to the language they use, how they're speaking about their services, how they're speaking about their clients. Those are all really big indicators too, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Marybeth, do you have any other question about picking coaches?
I just thought about inspiration porn and how some coaches I've chosen in the past like chose me as their client to kind of use me, on their page. That is also something you might want to avoid if you see that like trending on their profile or their website, especially if they're an able-bodied coach. That's just it's really hard to get out of, I think.
Yeah, that's such an excellent point.
That's gross, but I get exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
That That's
Like,
gross.
are you proud of me? Are you really trying to help me out? Or are you just trying to boost your views?
Yeah.
I ain't that cute online anyway.
I look better in real life.
I think too, like that happens with a lot of like inclusivity type stuff, because inclusivity and inclusive have become such buzzwords that people like do the performing of inclusivity without actually taking the actions behind it. And it becomes like so performative. And I think it's really easy to see like who wants to be known for doing the thing versus who's actually doing the thing, because the people who are actually doing the thing, it's significantly harder, and they're really, most people I know who are really doing the thing are dedicated to it for reasons above and beyond making money and being trendy. And like I think another kind of going back to like picking coaches, like asking about what the protocols are for if there an issue comes up, like people who have a system in place for if harm occurs, that's really important. And people who are just sort of performing inclusivity are just going to be like, well, you're either going to do what I say or I'm going to fire you, or whatever the case may be.
100%.
2 snaps in a circle for that one. No, oh gosh, nobody's gonna get that reference. I think before we change topics, we could take our baby break. So we're just gonna stare at each other for about 5 seconds for the YouTube. On the audio version, nobody will even know
Excellent
about the staring. Okay, great work. That's it. That's all we need. 2 seconds. I just chop it. Pling pling, boom, ad. Great. Pay for the podcast. Great job, everyone. We're doing amazing. Yeah, so I think that was a lot of great stuff about picking a coach, or just understanding, or maybe reframing how some people think about coaching. But I would love to hear more about your personal experience with, I don't know if it's new for you or not new for you, but lifting with chronic illnesses.
Yeah, so I have Hashimoto's and celiac. I've been diagnosed celiac for like 13 years. The Hashimoto's is a fairly new diagnosis. And I also have a brain injury that I sustained in 2020. So lifting definitely has taken a different turn in terms of that, especially like post brain injury and having more cognitive disabilities in that way. My focus took a really big hit. My ability to just focus for long periods of time, having headaches, stuff like that. So I've had to adjust my lifting and really adjust my expectations of myself, and not necessarily in a bad way. My lifting has really adjusted in that I know my capacity better and I'm more aware of it. So some weeks that looks like I'm doing every single thing on my program, I'm crushing it, it's great. Some weeks that means I'm only doing my main movements and I'm not doing my accessory movements. Some weeks it means I'm adjusting things up or down, and just really learning how to pivot and make those decisions for myself to help myself feel my best in the moment and in the future. Because so much of like lifting with chronic illness is about that recovery piece and looking at the long-term view versus just the session in front of you. Like I can go do a hard squat session, but I'm gonna be wrecked for a couple of days after, if I don't take certain like precautions, or if I don't do certain things to help enhance my recovery and just honor my capacity in that way. And it took a long time to be able, it'll take like really 2 years, like I just did my first powerlifting meet back like almost a month ago, to get to a place where I could train in that way again, and to train like super heavy and do things like that. And I think that my patience has really grown for lifting, because I remember even just a few years before that, if I had like a minor injury, like I'm very hypermobile, so I get like kind of random stability related injuries. So I would get something and I would just be like devastated, because my entire identity like hinged on this one activity or my ability to be an athlete. But so like diversifying my life, diversifying my identity really did a lot to help me manage my expectations of myself as a lifter with chronic illness.
Yeah, I think that last part is definitely peak at least for somebody that might not have had a congenital issue where they just, they already come into fitness and they're like, well, I'm gonna have to adapt. Like, you already have that mindset, so that might go differently. But for somebody that's been lifting and it's like doing pretty fairly okay, and then you're not, it's hard.
It is hard. And it's, I think the same thing can apply to like mental health flare-ups as well. Is it is hard to learn where that line is. I know for myself, I'm an incredibly stubborn person. So I have redlined myself probably more than I've ever needed to learn where that is. And the benefit of having a coach, I mean, my coach can kind of tell when I'm there and he can pull me back. And like, I think that's a huge benefit too, is for having like, even not just a coach, just like a support system in some way to say like, hey, let's look at what's going on here and kind of take a bigger picture view so that we can keep lifting for the long term. Because I think especially in sports like powerlifting, everybody wants to burn so hot and fast. You want to get there right now and you want to be at the peak of everything right now. But lifting can be a lifelong endeavor. Competitive lifting can be a lifelong endeavor. There are people who compete well into their 60s and 70s, and that's freaking rad. But we have nothing but time. So it just takes the patience to get through that time that I think is like really the hardest part.
That's true.
Everything is now. Everything is right now. Or even like how many competitions people do, or how often people even choose to sign up for competitions across sports, right? Like I might be like, I'm doing a strongman event this month. Next week I'm doing powerlifting, and it's just like, but why?
Yeah, like I've done that. I remember one year I did 2 strongman competitions 2 weekends in a row. I cut weight pretty hard for both.
I used to do that shit.
Terrible. It was awful. It was horrible. And like, I think also, especially for competitive athletes, the way you compete really matters. Like the competition I just did at the end of February, like I pushed hard, but I did not empty the tank fully because I know that I'm competing again in May. And then I'm going to have like a pretty long break after that. So even just knowing sort of what those limits are for yourself becomes really important. And then like, I can't compete all year round. Like competing's fun. I love it. But there's no way that my nervous system and my body can take that.
Yeah, not really. But it's kind of hard because at the main the mainstream strength elite people or whatever, whoever you're looking up to, right? Or like the people in your gym, everybody's doing that 3-4 competitions a year,
Right.
or there's like even the local shit, like, oh well, every February there's this guy's thing, and then every September is this guy's thing, and you don't want to miss it because everyone's doing it.
Yeah, and I think that there's ways to not miss stuff, but it means that you don't necessarily go out for a PR every single time. Like you can have a competition experience without totally trashing yourself. And it just becomes a matter of like, do you want to prioritize the experience or do you want to prioritize the PRs? And then like framing that out for the year and seeing like, like there's people who winter's a really hard time for them mentally and physically. So maybe that's not the time to compete. Maybe we aim for summer competitions and things like that, summer and spring. And we pick one that's a fun one and we pick one that's a PR focused one. Type situation. But yeah, there's definitely ways to adapt to that. It's just really about having that flexibility and being able to pivot in that way.
Wow, I didn't even realize that season like had a huge effect on how we perform mentally and physically. Because like you're right, when winter comes along, like it's a darker time of the year. I don't know why, but it just is. There's seasonal depression and it's just not the right time to compete sometimes.
Yeah. And it's just, and that's okay. And that's totally fine. And I think it really helps when you know yourself and you can like map your patterns. I'm really big on like energy mapping for people throughout the week or throughout a month type thing, like knowing what days are best for you in terms of lifting. what days are the busiest for you, so maybe we don't lift those days. And knowing kind of like your general energy patterns and mental health patterns can be really beneficial in that way, because you can organize your life in a way that is more fun. And so you're not constantly feeling like you're butting up against something, like you're butting up against obstacles constantly. You can kind of pivot around them instead.
Yeah, that's a really fair point.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
I think especially for programming, where it's like that takes me back to when I've had to switch from training 5 days a week down to 4, down to 3, or whatever. That's so important for a coach to keep in mind.
Yeah, and it's just, I think people get really caught up in like what is optimal. And at the end of the day, what is optimal is whatever you can do.
Yeah, whatever actually
even if
gets
that's
done.
yeah, and if it's 1 day a week, that's great. That's wonderful. 1 day a week is great. If that is a 30-minute session, excellent. Like all of those things are totally valid and totally worthy of like the same respect as somebody who trains 5 days a week for like 3 hours at a time, which I would not advise because that just seems kind of miserable. But teach.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's so true though. The fact that it all deserves to be respected, right? Because people, if you're like, oh, I'm a competitive whatever, I'm a competitive powerlifter, strongman. And, oh yeah, how often do you train? Oh, twice a week. They're gonna be like, she's probably not elite. Like you have to be like 4 days a week for 3 hours
Right.
sessions until I bleed. Like,
Yeah,
chill out.
like I've been there and I've been that person to like, but that is again like going back to like so much of your identity hinging on this constant like performing for worthiness, like we do in a lot of other arenas in our life too. I think that really bleeds over into the gym. And it's like once we start to like divest from that hustle culture and divest from those ideas of like only these types of people deserve respect, then we can really like open up the possibility and kind of make lifting more fun and enjoyable again, especially for people who have like additional different like needs, whether it's mental health or disabilities or just whatever,
or
like
kids, who knows?
Kids like just have life stuff because life gets real lifey.
Life comes at you
and
fast.
like it's just gonna be like that, and so we know it's gonna be like that, so why not build out a toolbox accordingly to make it so that we can navigate around those things and keep people doing what makes them happy and what makes them feel good.
Yeah, I feel that. I know in the beginning for me, when I first started getting whatever sick powerlifting, that was rough. And that's why I dropped powerlifting for so long, because to me it was like, well, if I can't train 4 days a week, or if I can't bench twice a week, then I can't be a powerlifter. I guess I'll just do strongman for a bit. It's a little more flexible. That's like stupid. Like the fact that I even had to think that, but that's how shit's presented.
Yeah, it is. And then there's so much like, I think especially like the Arnold just happened, right? Like, so there's so much social media content revolving around that. There's a real sense of like, you have to be, I think in strength sports especially, there is a sense of like, if you're going to do it, you better want to be elite at it. You don't have to want to be elite. You don't have to have it be your entire life, your entire identity if you don't want it to be. If you want your entire life to revolve around powerlifting, cool, that's great. But it doesn't have to be like that in order to do powerlifting. Like you can just do it as a fun hobby, and that's totally valid.
Yeah, there's an in-between. I think it's a part of that all or nothing problem that a lot of us have.
Yeah. And I was gonna say too, like it's funny because I feel like I don't want to say I've aged out of powerlifting, but there is like a mental maturity in these types of sports. And
there's
so
a coming of age.
You're right. It's like I could compete every 3 years or not, as opposed to 3 times a year. But like if you've come across a brand new client or a brand new athlete in that sport, they're probably gonna want to go over the top and if they do, you kind of just, it's kind of good that you have the energy meter, right? Every week.
Yeah. And like I do a lot of readiness metric tracking with my clients. So whether they use something like a Whoop or whatever that gives them like an HRV or sort of like readiness score, or I have like a little survey for those who don't have those tools that just asks about like their hydration, their stress, their emotional state and stuff like that. And they just kind of rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, just for a little bit of introspection that says like, if we're having a lot of days where we're in the lower end of those things, like maybe now is not the time to try and compete in a meet. Maybe we wait until this season of life is through and we change programming a little bit so it becomes something that's enjoyable rather than dreadful. And that is helping you live your best life instead of draining all of your energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that dreadful thing is, that's a big piece. There was a long time where I absolutely hated training, just dreaded it. And that's kind of not the point. Why did I mean, it's not like it's free, right? Like I'm spending money to make myself miserable. Why?
Yeah, it's
sense.
Real thing. I mean, I felt that way a lot too. And like, I think there's a difference between like dips and motivation. Like nobody is motivated all the time. That is very true. But we can like look forward to something. We can still enjoy something. But when it gets to a point where it's like a real sense of dread and it's impeding on your daily life and kind of bleeding over in that way, I think that's when it's really time to sort of evaluate, like, how can I do something that makes me happy? Maybe it is changing like training modalities. Maybe it's stepping away from training for a bit and just doing something totally different. But like all of that is very valid and very human. And I think that most people who are training for any extended amount of time go through that.
Definitely. I think anybody would go through that. But I think it takes like an extra level of, what do you call it, reflection or self-preservation when you're disabled, because it's like nobody really knows what you're going through unless you got a gaggle of disabled folks to like check in with, right? Like, usually most of us are the only person that could like set that meter and be like, you know what, this actually doesn't make sense for me.
Yeah. And it can be a really hard decision because I think that I know for myself, I really struggled with, well, I can't do things like I did in the past.
Yeah.
Like, why is this so hard now? Why is this thing that didn't feel hard before feel hard now? And that sort of just higher level sort of evaluation of capacity really can make that a very difficult thing.
Especially when you're hard-headed, like you said.
Definitely when you're hard-headed. It's weird. One of my last big powerlifting meets was like a Raw Nationals. I did a shit job, but I just remember like after the fact, the hubby and my brother came up and they were like, yeah, there was actually like a lot of people in the crowd like talking about you, and everybody was just confused. They're like, she usually does great. I don't know why she did so bad. Or like, why did she lower her openers? Like, what's going on with her? And they were like all so surprised that there's like literally like audience discussions.
That's so funny. On today's topic of Marcia's energy and health.
But even with that, I was still just like, it was a fluke. Let's do the next meet. We got this.
Right.
And I literally competed 2 months later. So I still didn't learn.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. Just so hard. I just relate to that so much.
Yeah. It definitely helps to have somebody that you can check in with, but it's hard.
Yeah, it is. And I think, like you said, having a support system or just even people who like kind of relate to you makes a really big difference. And even just having like from a coaching perspective, having somebody who actually cares about you as a human being and not just like a name on a spreadsheet is such a big difference for especially disabled lifters or anybody with chronic illness, because there are just days and weeks and months and things like that where shit's just not going to happen sometimes, and like we need to move around it, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Definitely. Hard, definitely. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we did not quite touch on?
I think we touched on some really awesome stuff, so I'm good with what we talked about. Yeah.
Marybeth?
Yeah, I mean, no, thank you for sharing that. It's really great to know that there are people out there that will listen to you, listen to your body and your mind, because that's changing on a constant basis. Like, even if you're prepping for a meet, 8 weeks from now, it's going to change every single week. And sometimes it's not going to go as planned. And to be understanding, like, I always felt bad, like telling my coach, even though I knew they were understanding, that like I didn't hit my numbers that day, or I didn't hit it all week. But just hearing that from you makes me feel like validated in like, I don't know, just resetting. We have to kind of tell ourselves that sometimes.
Yeah, and I think
seasons.
people get really caught up in, like, especially with meat prep, like having a perfect meat prep. There is no perfect meat prep. I had a meat prep where I was in the hospital with appendicitis 2 weeks out, and I did not have surgery, thank goodness. But
Ow.
like training obviously was not going well the last 2 weeks of a peak, but I still had a great meet and like pulled a lifetime deadlift PR. And like people are so like resilient and adaptable that even if things aren't going perfectly, it's okay. And it's okay to like decatastrophize that, because there's like one bad week or one like tough week is not going to ruin an entire year's worth of progress. And that's okay. Like, we all have different needs, and it's okay to expect those needs to be met from the people you're paying to meet those needs.
Yeah, let's not forget.
Right.
Paid for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so true. And like you said, it's like longevity. I want to be able to, lift my groceries at the age of 60, 70 years old, not break your back. I mean, that's fine too, but be careful with it. Adapt.
It's the all or nothing, and everything is right now or it's never. Like, you gotta just like get out of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's just such like, capitalist hustle culture is just ingrained so deeply in so many of us. And so divesting from that, it can be really difficult. And then it's just one of those things where I always encourage my lifters to build their own toolbox of tools for themselves so they can self-regulate on training days. Because I can only anticipate so much, even though I check in with my lifters like every week or like multiple times a week, based on their comments and feedback. But I want all of my lifters to have tools to say, like, you know what, today is maybe like a day where I'm not feeling that great. Something is flaring up. What can I do instead? Can I do like an at-home workout with dumbbells? Does that meet my capacity? Can I go for a walk? Can I lower my percentages? Can I change up my rep scheme? And I think that, it's important, and this kind of goes back to choosing a coach. Like, it's important to make sure that a coach recognizes your sovereignty and your autonomy and your own efficacy, because like you said, nobody really knows what you're going through, especially as like a disabled or person with chronic illness. Like, it's important to have those tools so that you can regulate and do what's best for you at the end of the day.
And not feel guilty about it.
Not feel guilty.
At the end of the day, you're still that
ashamed.
same person. Like, I'm gonna wake up weak one day and strong the next. There's a balance in life.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's fine.
But we're laughing, but that's really hard for a lot of us to like realize as disabled people. Like, we're constantly trying to prove society wrong. That's already that's a struggle.
Its own chapter in a different book.
Right.
Hearing that it's okay is important.
And it's just like such a valid human thing. And I don't know when we took so much humanity out of like coaching and athletics and sports and things like that, because like at the end of the day, we are human beings doing these things. and it's okay to have very human experiences and very human emotions and differing human capacities.
I'm with it. Yeah, I think we're having a great time because last year, what was that last year, right? Serena Biles and Naomi Osaka pulled out of things. They're like, you know what, this isn't gonna work for me. People are in a fucking uproar. This is a great time period. I think we're finally at least having the conversation of remembering that people doing the sports are people.
Exactly. Like people are real humans behind screens and stuff.
The conversation as of 2022 is at least starting.
Yes.
It's terrible, but better than nothing.
I know. I was gonna say, like, fuck the double standard, because only when it's women do people complain, right?
Oh, don't even get there.
Yeah.
Don't even go there.
Great advice. Thank you so much.
Yes. Let's remind people where they could find you on the internet.
So my Instagram is Gab Strength, Gab Strength. That's my main platform there. I am frequently on the internet. I am an online person, but that would be the main place to find me. I've got a bunch of links for different things, like for coaching applications. Also, I'm pretty much always in my DMs, and all my contact information is on that page as well.
And we didn't talk about the tarot stuff or the writing or any of that, but that page is linked in there too, right?
Yes. Yeah, I have a different page and it's got a lot of symbols in it, but if you search the Gift of Gab, a picture of me will pop up eventually. But I did write a book that has nothing to do with fitness or health. It's a book of poetry and essays that is for sale. And I also do tarot readings. So just a little bit of everything.
I love it. Yeah, maybe we have to do another episode on that.
Oh, yeah.
We got Gabby with tarot. We got to get Monica back so she could fuck us all up with crystals, right?
Oh, there we go.
Was she the one with crystals?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. We got to get out the gaggle of people, have a whole thing going. Anyways, that's it for
Why
now,
you keep saying gaggle?
Gaggle, that's my word of the day, baby. Gaggle.
It's a good word.
Gaggle of people.
I don't know. I got one good word. I'm sticking with it. All right. Disabled girls out.
Yay!
I'm talking. All right, fantastic. So this is not gonna work. Hold on. It's pinching me. All right, great. Welcome. Hello. Disabled Girls Who Live Patreon. This is Marcia, she, they on Seminole Tribe land. I've got my bulky headphones and my microphone. I'm sitting in front of my colorful wall with my clear glasses. I'm a black spoony femme, feeling very chatty today. Marybeth, you're next.
With your hair done, don't forget about that. Looks good. Marybeth, she, her, sitting on Ohlone land here in Northern California, wearing a rust sweater, black glasses, black headphones, black hair in my living room. Welcome to my space. Just kidding. And our lovely guest, who we just had a fantastic episode with, I feel so healed and empowered. Gabby, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Gabby, she, her. I'm sitting on Powhatan land in Richmond, Virginia. I am wearing a gray crew neck with gold hoops. I've got black and red hair sitting in front of my little curio cabinets with some plants on it and a brick wall behind me.
Fantastic. So Marybeth wanted our Patreon bonus content to get into the tarot stuff. So we didn't really talk about it at all. What's going on?
Yeah, so I read tarot, which is a wild thing that I never thought I would say. But I have like a whole separate Instagram account for my tarot and my writing because I've also written a book of poetry and essays. And we were just kind of talking about this offline, but I come from a family of tarot readers. So my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my great-great-grandmother were all have all read tarot, and I actually own my great-grandmother's tarot deck, which is probably like one of my favorite possessions. It's really cool. It's from like the 70s. It's got like really neat 70s artwork. It's pretty
super powerful.
Yeah, it's kind of just, it has like a special place like that sits on like top of my bar where all my other stuff is. And I will read for my family with it and like read with it for special occasions.
Nice. So do you keep an altar or like a working space where you do tarot
Yeah.
reading specifically?
Yeah, I do keep like an altar that will have I have like a little corner for my ancestors, so that's where that tarot deck sits. And some offerings for them and just some memorabilia over there. And I'm usually doing something with candles. So I've always got a 7-day candle going and lots of candles going and some crystals up there as well. And then I actually typically end up moving a lot of that stuff to my dining table where I'm sitting now to do readings for
Mm.
clients, because it's just a bigger space to do that. But I keep all my tarot decks up on my altar.
Yeah, I always
That's
wondered how the practical side of that worked because I have the altar and I'm like, how do people do this for a living? They just pack the whole thing.
I usually like pick and choose based on what the person has told me that their intention or question is, and kind of like intuitively pick some things. I also read with like a couple of different decks, so I'll just intuitively pick the deck, and stuff like that.
So people usually have a specific question, right? Like it's not you know, just pull it and
or
just say
something like going on in their life that they want to know more about.
Yeah, it's usually like a specific question, or like you said, something going on in their life. Or I even have clients who it's like every 3 months or every 6 months, they kind of just do like a check-in reading and we do something like that. So it just kind of depends on the person. But most people come to tarot with like a specific question or a specific intention in mind.
Mm. Yeah, that's cool. So I don't I don't know whether I come from a family of tarot card specifically readers, because in hoodoo or in Haitian voodoo, it's not really tarot, it's kind of playing cards. But playing cards
Mhm.
are essentially the minor arcana. So it's pretty
Right.
interesting that the concept is still pretty much there.
And
It's
is
like
it actually called hoodoo? Or you
so
just said
you I might be saying it wrong, but like if you're practicing it generally, like you know, you have an altar and maybe you have some sort of divination form, whether it's tarot or smoke or I don't know, crystals, whatever, right? That's a
Mhm.
divination tool. But that's it, then that's hoodoo. But Haitian voodoo is like you are in it. You know, like you don't say you're Catholic without having being baptized and doing like all the shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like that. So I wouldn't say I'm practicing that or I'm like doing that because I don't go to any meetings or nothing. Like I've never done any of
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Gabby, was your grandmother like a really huge influence on that, or did it start with you receiving the deck of cards?
So I didn't receive the deck until a little bit later in my tarot journey, but it was something that I had always been interested in. And I had met somebody locally who is like a psychic medium and also does a lot of tarot. And we had met about a bunch of different things. And she had started like reading for me, and kind of encouraged me to develop my own skill around it because she was like, you definitely have something going on here. And I was like, well, this seems like coming from such like an intellectual space, I was like, well, if nothing else, this is like a great processing tool to like
This
have
is
these
a great
archetypes.
meditation and self-reflection technique.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like that was my initial thought going into it because it was like I was trying to like intellectualize the process so much and it's so like archetype based and stuff like that. And so that's how I started doing it. And then I was like, oh, I feel really, really connected to this and really, really connected to like part of my culture. Like I'm part Mexican, like that side of my culture, I feel really connected to it in this way. And that's when I found out about like my great grandmother really being into tarot and my great great grandmother being a spiritualist and stuff like that. And so then after that, my grandma, for whatever reason, had hung on to her mother's deck, and
Mm.
she sent it to me, which was like so cool. It's definitely one of
That's
my like prized possessions.
That
that's
is
so
pretty
great.
cool.
And just like the accidental discovery. Yeah, it sounds like a movie.
It does.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like my mom kind of got into it too. Like she has a deck, and things like that. And I think it's really like last time my grandma was out visiting and stuff, we were talking about it, and it really was like such a big part of our like family's culture that really got suppressed. In like how every other culture gets suppressed in terms of like colonization and things like that and
Yeah.
trying to fit in and all of that sort of stuff. And so it's been very lovely to see sort of the rebirth of that come through.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's how I feel doing that stuff too. It's like
Mhm.
everything was always hush hush, but like when shit is going down and you have like a Haitian auntie or whatever, like best believe she's gonna put up a fucking shrine. Like she's gonna go to her like top priestess lady like every week and pay her like like come on. Like I used to find like my mom I found this thing with my name and my boyfriend at the time, now husband, and then like some fucking candle wax in a circle stuffed under my mattress.
Yeah.
I was like, yo, what the fuck is this, mom? And she's just like, it's just something for your relationship, you know. And then that was it.
That's okay.
Right? And it was like, go read your Bible.
But she didn't
like,
tell
what?
you beforehand.
No, it's just like, all right, go read your, but if shit hits the fan, if I, like rest in peace, but if I called her up and I'd be like, yo, I feel like somebody has it out to me, some weird shit is happening, she'd be like, all right, here's what you're gonna do at the strike of noon every day, you're gonna open Psalm 40. I'm like it was there, but I really wish it was more open. There's so much shit I could have learned.
Yeah, and that's, there's just like little quirks and like little things that were like quote unquote like old wives' tales that were really rooted in so much like Mexican witch folklore type stuff that like my family did and like my aunties did especially, and things like that. And then like coming full circle and learning more about that, I was like, oh, like I see what you're doing here. We just couldn't talk about it openly.
No, we just all the weird random little things, like don't ever gift anybody a wallet without money in it. Like, okay, whatever you say, mom. Like just weird shit like that, right?
Exactly.
But I think all of this too, that empowerment coming from it is so recent thanks to social media, because I mean, the reason why it was so hush hush, people literally died
right
for this, witches got burned alive, and it's a scary thing. It's probably still happening in other countries right now, but I don't know, I love, because spiritually ghosts also have always been like so heavy and like heavily ingrained in my family. When our ancestors have passed, like we always know that there's a presence around us in specific houses that we visit, specifically my dad's right now. And you have that fear as a child, but as you grow up, I found like a sense of safety. And I feel like that's what you two are kind of going for as well. Like when you experience something so heavy, you find a way to cope with it as well. That's what I'm sensing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm with you on that one.
Me too.
Is there I would guess, because the fact you said you went to Catholic school, a lot of syncretism in the spirituality, because that's the other part that I've like realized too, is that a lot of it was like literally using Psalms in the Bible as spells.
Yeah, like a lot of Mexican ghost magic is very, very heavily Catholic.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't practice a ton of that. I do some like candle work with that and stuff like that. Like I have like a botanica I go to and I get my candles and like I wear my red bracelet and like do all that sort of stuff. But it was so interesting to me, like learning all this, to see how much was just taken from like different older traditions, like in terms of like Catholicism, Christianity in general, obviously, and to like see those synchronicities come up, it was very interesting.
If anybody has time, it's a lot of fun to Google syncretism and see how people, because like you said, people were literally getting killed for this, and see how people hid their spiritual or ancestral religions inside Christianity or Catholicism. So like for me, I know that of the Ogun, like the gods and whatever, right? Especially from the Haitian culture, a lot of them are very African or whatever. There's some names that are different, whatever. But you could find like the mother, Mary, mother of Christ version, right? Like, it's Mary, which is also, I think Ursula or something, right? Like there's like a parallel person for each one. So you might go as a 10-year-old to your aunt's house and be like, wow, she really loves her some saints. But to her, like they're all different whatever gods of, like her great grandmothers. Like that shit is nuts.
Right. And it's very interesting. And I really relate to like, especially like talking about ghosts. So the building I live in is from the late 1800s. I live in a very old city, and it was a factory that was converted into a hospital during the Civil War, and like a bunch of people died here. It's supposed to be like one of the most haunted buildings in my city. Like we're on the ghost tour and Halloween and stuff like that. And like I love living here because there are so many ghosts. And like feeling, but like you said, like I feel a sense of safety, especially like with my ancestors and things like that. And like even talking about like ghosts and spirituality and tarot was something that I didn't do until very recently, because it felt still so hush hush, like you wouldn't be taken seriously, or like that aspect of spirituality like wasn't allowed, especially like in the profession that I'm in, which is just so dominated by like a lot of toxic things in general.
Right.
So it's been a very like interesting experience to have all those things kind of line up at once.
It is.
I love that.
It is very interesting. Most of these kind of conversations for me will happen in DMs for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, what?
Oh, wow, that's why like I started a whole different account, because I was like, I want this to be a thing, and I want a place to like have my art be in the world in a way that was like a little bit different. It was like a little bit less pressure to make it fit something else other than just like art existing for its own sake and like tarot existing for its own sake and stuff like that.
I'm with it. What a fantastic discussion.
I love that. And I'm gonna go check out your book because I love poetry as well.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. Disabled Girls out.
Peace.